which team do you like their prospects more going forward as they both seem to kind of start getting into gear? Trev, will go with you, Hack.
Go, Trev.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think Michigan is the better team out of these two at this point. I know they played Nebraska. Nebraska struggled. You know, Hack, you mentioned Nebraska's still alive in the West, which isn't saying much. But I think, you know, what I mentioned, my
crazy.
But Blake Corum is fantastic. I just think that they have that been there before factor as well. Now, I don't want to take anything away from LSU because the rebound that they've had after what we were saying about them, you know, week 1, week 2, week 3, and what Brian Kelly has done down there is fantastic. I don't think this game should have been a 13-10 game against Arkansas. I think Arkansas is sure got a couple weapons, but it should have been a lot more points than this. That being said, you get a win, and I got to shout one guy out, Harold Perkins Jr., the Houston boy.
The defensive end, little Von Miller.
4 sacks in this ballgame as a freshman.
He made some money tonight.
That is called wreaking havoc. And I'll shout out another Houston boy, Josh Williams, running back, 122 yards rushing. Houston they said, hey, we don't want to stay in the state of Texas. We're going to go across the border to LSU. And we're gonna make our name for ourselves over here. Both of those Houston guys had big days today. That was the reason for the win. But to answer your question, I think Michigan head-to-head between these two is the more impressive team at this point.
Hey, Hack, I want to get your impressions right off of what Trevor just gave us. But initially, is Ohio State closer to Georgia? Or is Michigan closer to Ohio State? Meaning, what's the gap between Michigan and the top 2 teams?
Wow.
Or is it Georgia with those two both on their heels?
No, I don't. That's a great question. It's tough. I don't think my only qualm with Michigan is that J.J. McCarthy hasn't had to be the guy. He hasn't had to be the guy. He hasn't had to take a game on his shoulders and go out and win it. And I don't know if Michigan's tooled outside. They got the David Bell kid outside, who I think is a really good receiver, gonna be a problem. But like outside of him, they have some other guys who have physical tools, have physical traits, big recruits, all these things, but they haven't been asked to perform with the big light shining on them. And I don't know. Let me ask you
this: has Stetson Bennett been
Yes.
asked?
He did it. He did, and that's my point. Is whether it's this, he's done it. He's won the big game.
Oh, okay.
Stetson's done it. He's been there, done that, won the big game. Whether he's had to do it this year or not, I think he shouldered a bigger load this year than he did last year because of all the shit we were talking about him. And he's done it week in, week out, like you were saying, George, using his legs. He's adding a bunch of different dynamics to it, and they're doing it in different ways.
But McCarthy is untested, as to your point.
He's just untested, man. And it's nothing against the kid. I think he's talented as hell. I think he's a really, really good player. But
insulated though.
It's just he's been protected. He's been gifted with a phenomenal offensive line that has and 2 great backs behind him. It's just really hard for me to put my chips in a basket with a team that has a quarterback at the most important position in the sport who hasn't been tested in crunch time. I don't know how he's going to react, down 10 and having to climb back without being able to go around and turn around, hand it off. It's just that's my biggest thing with Michigan. Now, do I think Michigan from a roster standpoint? Michigan's right there, and they've proved that. They've proved that they've built an identity. They've done it a different way. I think Michigan's more similar to Georgia from a mentality standpoint in terms of great defense, physical offensive line play. But it's just Ohio State's so different with the type of players that they have and the like you said, they're running on fucking jet fuel. Yeah. Some of these other bowl boys are getting it done with diesel and they're getting it done nasty and they can do it that
Mules.
way. But yeah, right. They're getting it done. But I do think that Ohio State and Georgia are kind of, like you said, I think you made a great point. They're kind of in a place of their own from a roster standpoint. And that's hard to say because Michigan got Ohio State last year, but I think they've made some improvements this offseason and it's shown this year. So
here's how I feel. Here's how I feel about that question. when I just kind of visualize the Big Ten, if Ohio State beats Michigan, wins the Big Ten, I think Ohio State has a real shot to win the national championship, meaning they could go and beat Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying they're going to, I'm saying they could.
Mm-hmm.
If Michigan somehow beats Ohio State and wins the Big Ten, I don't feel confident that they're going to go and win the national title or even could.
It's a great point.
I think that's the answer to that question from my standpoint. Is not saying Michigan can't beat Ohio State. I just have a lot more confidence in Ohio State going in and hoisting a trophy at the end of the year than I do Michigan.
So to me, I love the take, but styles make fights. And I think the kryptonite to Ohio State's cape right now would be a brutal inside the guards, inside the tackles, time of possession, choke holding, really good defensive team. That's Georgia and Michigan. Georgia's a little bit more of it than what Michigan is. So they're going to get tested. They're going to get everything they can possibly handle. You're saying if they can get through Michigan, they'll have a similar style of animal when they see Georgia. That animal will just be a little bigger, badder, better.
Yeah.
But I think you make a great point. But Georgia, Michigan is different this year to me in that matchup. Should they see each other again, to me, it's a little bit different. I think Michigan, I say that, and McCarthy was 10 out of 20 today for 148 yards. But if you watch that game, sleet, snow, hail, but in a neutral, clean site, when they get out here to LA or wherever that game's going to get played, I think Michigan's a little bit different. First of all, the confidence and the recognition, we've already been in this thing. We've already seen these guys, and it pretty much was a solid battle. We just couldn't punch it in when we got in the red zone last year. But that's a fascinating thing. So on the spectrum, just to get it crystal clear one more time from you, Trevor, Georgia, Michigan, you think Ohio State's closer on this end, or Ohio State's closer to Georgia?
I think Ohio State's closer to Georgia than they are to Michigan.
Interesting. Well, there it is.